Hello, everyone. Welcome as we're filtering in. Grab a seat, grab something to drink. We'll get started here in a minute. All right, nice hello.
Awesome. Hello, hello.
While you're coming in, something I always like to do on webinars is you should have the ability to chat with us, but drop a note in chat where you're zooming in from today. Love to kind of find out where our attendees are coming from across the world.
My
Oh,
goodness.
Trinidad. That sounds like a nice place right now.
Trinidad sounds like somewhere that's a little bit warmer than good old New England where I'm based.
Beaches, Norway, Poland, UK. So it's in the evening for you folks in Europe. So thank you for taking your evening and spending it with us here today. This is awesome. Korea. Whoa, let me see. Is
Wow.
it 2 a.m. in Korea? I think so, or something like that,
That
maybe.
was fast math, Alan. I am very impressed.
If they're like the Philippines, which is 12 hours ahead or 13. So, yeah. Estonia, Angola. Nice. Great crew. This is
Yeah,
awesome.
solid representation globally. Shout out to everybody that is online to join us live, and it's like the middle of the night for you.
Yeah, for sure.
We appreciate you so, so much. All right. It looks like attendance is starting to flatten out a little bit. So I think we've got everybody that was waiting. So I think we can go ahead and get started. So here we go. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Modernizing Remote Access to EKS with Tailscale. We are so glad you could join us today. My name is Kate. I'll be your host today. Before we get started, just a quick couple housekeeping notes. The first is that this session is being recorded. We will share this recording with you after the fact. If you miss anything, don't worry about it. If it's the middle of the night for you and you decide that you'd rather catch up on the recording later, I promise we won't be offended. We will have time for a live Q&A at the end of today's session. As you have questions as we go through the presentation, please drop them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. If you use the chat box, we may miss it. So your best bet to get your question answered is to throw it in that Q&A box. We also have one of our solutions engineers monitoring the chat and the Q&A box today. Shout out to Kartik. He will be answering as many questions as he can in the chat directly. We'll go through the main presentation first, and then Alan and Raj will answer some of your questions live at the end. With that, I will hand things over to Alan to kick us off.
Awesome. Thank you, Kate. I appreciate it. And again, welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're calling in from. And it looks like we have folks from all over the world. So that's always super excited. And if you're not sure why you're here, well, this is our slide, Modernizing Remote Access to EKS with Tailscale. So we got some cool things we're going to show about leveraging Tailscale along with EKS. And we'll get to those in a few minutes. But as a quick intro, my name's again Alan. I'm one of the solutions engineers over here at Tailscale. Been here for just over 2 years or so, and seen a lot of excitement, a lot of growth, talking to customers that are leveraging Tailscale or new to Tailscale. So I'm excited to help co-host this along with Raj, and I'll pass it over to you for your intro, Raj.
Hey guys, my name's Raj. I'm a customer success engineer here at Tailscale, and echoing Alan, I'm kind of doing the same kind of stuff, helping our customers onboard and utilize things like our Kubernetes operator.
Cool, awesome. So let's jump right into it, and definitely drop a note in comments in our Q&A as Kate mentioned, and we'd love to answer these questions. And the goal of today and today's agenda is to educate you a little bit more. Hopefully you leave today have a little bit of better understanding of Tailscale and our Kubernetes operator and some of the cool things you can do with it. So that is what we're going to cover. Working with AWS, even though the title is EKS, Kubernetes can be run anywhere, but we are partners with AWS. And so we're grateful for that partnership and being able to work and within AWS, and a lot of our customers are there as well. Then we'll be talking through Kubernetes around Tailscale. Then the fun stuff, Raj will be leading a really cool demo of showing how Tailscale with our operator can work and how you can even implement some of that today. And then at the end, we're going to have a Q&A. So definitely bring those questions and we'll do our best to get to them for sure. So for those that are brand new and have never heard of Tailscale, you signed up, someone said, hey, join this webinar. Thank you for coming. So I'm going to do a quick high-level overview for some of you that are familiar with Tailscale, have been using it already. Some of this might be a repeat, but I'll just do a little bit of a high level of what is Tailscale. Tailscale is a zero trust network overlay, built on WireGuard. WireGuard, which is an awesome open source VPN networking protocol that layers end-to-end encryption for any of those devices. Tailscale is built on top of that, and we just make it easier. For those that have played with WireGuard in the past, maybe you've set up your own WireGuard systems and tunnels, and it's great for home lab work. But what happens after a while, if you're trying to scale it, you start realizing, oh, I've got a lot of technical debt or burden potentially on this. So we've come along and we've tried to simplify that to make Tailscale really work well for those folks and not have to worry about maintaining a ton of that infrastructure behind the scenes. Tailscale operates on layer 3. So the geeks in the room here, those that are familiar with the OSI model, recognizing all these different layers, Tailscale lives on layer 3 predominantly. We are, as mentioned previously, an encrypted network overlay. So, devices get a IP address and, they bridge across whatever your internet service provider is or that physical and data link layer to talk to other Tailscale devices around the world. Different tools out there also operate at a variety of layers. Some tools out there operate on pure layer 7, like an application layer. Some are layer 6, even some on layer 5. But bringing it down to the network layer, as Tailscale does, introduces a lot more ability to be granular in how you manage that network access. And when you can tie access to devices on a network level, you can layer some of these other pieces on top of it and just makes it a really nice experience for end users. So it is because it's WireGuard, so it's a mesh networking tool. Again, if you're not familiar with Tailscale and you're thinking, well, what's mesh networking? The traditional VPN or a lot of the traditional connectivity tools out there that, L2TP, IPsec, SSL VPNs tend to operate on a hub and spoke type of model. Tailscale, because WireGuard, it's mesh based and it's really designed as a point-to-point. And on top of that, we layer a user's identity within that. So we're not just saying, hey, this laptop can see this or do whatever. It's based on that identity of that person that's trying to accomplish or trying to access something. And in today's world of zero trust and being able to tie into identity, that's a huge thing because now you can say, hey, Alan's identity, when he authenticates, he uses multi-factor authentication into different applications and sites and tools. Tailscale is going to take that identity and then leverage that with our adaptive policy engine in order to grant access across the board. And the nice thing about when you have it with like identity and things along that line is you get the ability to do least privilege access. So traditionally, for those of us that are old, been around and maybe work in an office that has a traditional firewall, corporate LAN, you hop in, you plug in, you start work, and you may or may not realize you might have access and can see all the things on a corporate LAN. And that's traditionally how a lot of access has been done in the past. Fast forward today where you've got workers working remote, working hybrid, and doing all kinds of stuff, different areas, might not even be in an office at the same workstation or along that line. Now you say how we can't just segment and base security on a border perimeter of a firewall going along that line. So we need to add that through the identity. And no better way to do it than that user's identity. So when I sign in, we can look at that and say, hey, Alan's signing in, so our policy engine is going to look at Alan. They're going to look at these access control lists based on his name and his identity, and then we're going to grant them access as needed. And it's even, you're explicitly authorizing. Again, Tailscale operates on initially as a deny by default. That's this part of Tailscale. It's also part of WireGuard. So unless someone has been given explicit permissions to access a resource, they're not going to be able to see it. So you have to deny, put in a special rule that, hey, we're going to give Alan access. We're going to give Raj access to this Kubernetes cluster because we trust him. He's in the right group, etc. You can integrate this policy that we have, our policy manager, using tools like infrastructure as code, using GitOps, ways that you can implement and the policies from Tailscale into your workflow, your day-to-day managing access. One other cool thing that is out now for those that have been using Tailscale for a while, you notice previously we've had this text editor, it's JSON editor for our policies within the Tailscale application. Nowadays, we have a visual editor, which is really cool. So it gives, again, users the ability to quickly look at and say, let's make a rule that gives this person access to this device from a human to machine perspective. Or maybe let's give an access rule that gives these two Kubernetes clusters access to one another using machine to machine policies. And with our visual editor or tying it into something like GitOps or infrastructure as code, allows you the ability to be very granular in how you're managing access for your users and your user devices as well. So a few deployment models, and then one I just thought of here is not mentioned here is the Kubernetes model here. So, but Tailscale on a high level, when you're looking at from deploying it, you have device to device where I've got Tailscale running on my laptop, I've got it running on my phone, I've got it running on a virtual machine in AWS, that kind of device piece there. There's also the model of a subnet router where you have Tailscale running on your laptop or phone, but then I need to get access to a printer. Or maybe we have an old Windows server that we can't put Tailscale on for some reason. Well, you can use a subnet router, which allows your connectivity to bridge into local area networks and even add multiple different routes across the board. An app connector is another model of deploying in Tailscale. It's the ability to leverage Tailscale as a exit node or direct proxy in essence to a SaaS type application. How this comes into play a lot is where we see customers that have whitelisted SaaS apps or applications where they need to have only allowing ingress from this known IP address. Well, if you're all in an office, it's easy. You just get the corporate LAN, the corporate WAN IP address, plug it in, call it a day. Well, what happens when people travel? They're at a conference, they're at a hotel, they're working from home. Now they have to open up a ticket and say, oh, I've got a new home IP address. Can you add this to the whitelist? That just doesn't scale effectively. Whereas if you had something like the app connector, now you can just say, you know what? As long as that person's on the tailnet and they're connecting through, we're going to allow and proxy that connectivity into that third-party app. So it's a great way of managing that. And then the last piece here is exit node. Is Tailscale operates split tunnel for those that are like, hey, can I use Tailscale full tunnel or split tunnel? Out of the box, it does operate as a split tunnel network overlay. So if you're working and you're accessing, corporate resources, it's going to go over Tailscale along that line. But if you're on lunch break, you're going to YouTube or listen to Spotify or whatever, do something else, it's going to route through your general public internet and bypassing that exit node. Bypassing Tailscale. But you can flip it and turn it on saying, you know what, we're going to full tunnel our traffic. We've got some people traveling at a conference and maybe there's some sketchy Wi-Fi and we just want to be a little bit more secure. So now we've put up some exit nodes out there that employees and others can take advantage of and leverage that. So as mentioned earlier, Tailscale and AWS, we are partners. We are an ISV partner with AWS. We're verified on there. You can find us in the marketplace. And AWS is actually helps us a lot with some of our webinars. So in this case, for those that have AWS spend or you are doing a lot within the AWS marketplace, you can find Tailscale there. Reach out to us as well. We have a whole team that's dedicated to helping customers transact and work within AWS. But we're excited and we're thankful for their partnership for this as well. All right, so let me take a glass of water here. So that's it from a high level what Tailscale is. So let's jump into why you're here today, right? The meat of Tailscale and today's webinar, Tailscale and Kubernetes. So one deployment option that didn't show up on that last screen is that ability to leverage Kubernetes. So over the last year or so, our team has built out a Kubernetes operator, which is really awesome. It allows you to extend Tailscale to your Kubernetes clusters, providing secure access to your control plane, access those non-Kubernetes services and from Kubernetes, as well as enable cross-cluster connectivity. And that is some of the cool stuff that Raj will be showing later on today. From an authentication piece there, what Tailscale looks like on the frictionless piece there is it can leverage and manage the Kube API access. So when we talk about identity-based networking, and we're now introducing Kubernetes into our network. Well, we don't want everyone to be system masters. Maybe the DevOps team needs to be, but maybe this engineering group only needs to have access to certain namespaces. Well, Tailscale, you can leverage the Tailscale operator to manage access to the Kube API, as well as even down to some of the authentication, some of the permissions pieces there, which is a really, fundamental use case, but also something we see some great usage out of for sure. Another thing that is really cool with Kubernetes is this is a relatively new feature, I think, in the last 2 to 3 months. We've had SSH recording for a while now, and it's a really cool feature if you're doing a lot of SSH. But one thing we have now and more coming out is the ability to connect to those Kubernetes sessions, those pods, exec in, but having a session recording and the ability to audit what's happening on there. So now you can kube exec into a pod, do some work on it, you get out, but now we have this nice session recording that's recorded in ASCII cinema format, allows you to parse it, download it, or view it. Again, this is all stored within your Tailnet in infrastructure that you control. Tailscale does not see this, but allows companies, security teams to be able to have these recordings from a security compliance, an audit, and even training capabilities within their Kubernetes clusters. The other thing that we have here, and I think Raj will, flip it over to you here on the next slide, is the cross-cluster connectivity piece. As I mentioned, Kubernetes allows you that ability to network Kubernetes clusters wherever they might be around the world, or in different AWS regions and data centers. And so you can use the Kubernetes operator to help manage that. In this case, in this example, showing that how we have Tailscale operator, you got an ingress, egress, proxy pair. They can see one another. Those services and those clusters can communicate securely over a fully encrypted tunnel over the general public internet or within region or whatever it might be, knowing that it's all managed from a Tailscale side of the fence. And Raj, I'll let you kick in here on this piece here. So this ties in, I think, to some of your demo stuff.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So now let's go a little bit over the demo that I'm gonna kind of show you guys. So I have like 2 major use cases that I will essentially showcase here. The first one is like, okay, you have a singular Kubernetes cluster that's kind of running Grafana, and then you have multiple other clusters that are kind of hosting Prometheus instances. Using the Kubernetes operator, we can actually establish connectivity across regions or across different clusters to actually expose the other cluster's Prometheus instances directly to your Grafana instance. And I will showcase that in a little bit. Then the other option is actually like a high availability, almost like a failover aspect. So in this case, another example I'm going to give you is like kind of running your own ChatGPT. So I'll be using like Open Web UI to kind of expose a front-end interface, and then have other clusters that kind of have some GPUs attached to them and are running inference models. So like in this case, we're going to be running Qwen, which will allow gateway clusters to access the inference clusters to make their queries. So this is kind of, what the EKS CTL configuration kind of looks like here. We have one cluster in US East 1, and then another one in inference cluster in US West 2. The node groups you'll notice are kind of slightly different, is that the inference cluster actually has, I believe, T40 NVIDIA GPUs attached to them. So to first expose something into the tailnet, we call this ingress, right? We're going to spin up something we call a proxy group ingress, which you'll see at the top left there. I'll assign some identity tags to them. In this case, what location they're in, and what kind of thing is this. In this case, it's K8s. It's highly available, so we'll spin up a couple of them, 3 replicas, and then have some host name prefixes so that these proxy groups that you'll define will actually spin up Tailscale clients within your cluster that kind of act as that, I guess it's a proxy that's essentially funneling traffic in and out of Tailscale in your private network. So at the bottom left, you'll see the Tailscale service. And here we're defining a host name. So what do we want the connectivity point to be? In this case, we named it Quen. We attached a proxy group ingress via the annotation as well. And, instead of a cluster IP, it's very similar to an EC2 ELB or load balancer. We'll actually set a load balancer class of Tailscale and then expose, I guess in this case, port 80 of our Quen model to our tailnet. So I guess the path here is kind of your client, any client, whether that be another Kubernetes cluster or your Tailscale laptop, will first reach a proxy pod running within your cluster, and then forward its traffic through the cluster IP service running in your Kubernetes cluster. And as you can see, the operator has came in and assigned an IP address in the CGNAT range, which is where Tailscale IPs kind of live, and then also provided you a host name. In this case, it's quen.raj.tsm. And then this is the idea of egressing a service. So you'll similarly deploy a proxy group egress, and then within a service, you'll define something we call an external name service, which is kind of, how we are exposing tailnet services to a cluster. So in this case, we want to expose USW2's AI Quen model via that annotation there to the tailnet as the service name of USW2 AI Quen LLM predictor. And you can see the operators came in, it's assigned a name to the external name and created a actually headless service within your cluster to actually sorry about that, forward traffic from your tailnet into the cluster. So that's kind of what's going on here. So I guess now I'll take over screen sharing here.
Yep.
And the first thing I'll share is I kind of have given you, I kind of have examples of everything. So first is API server connectivity, the recorder, and then obviously the cross-cluster connectivity as well. So the first thing I will show is what things look like within the cluster. So from a, I guess, user perspective. So I'm going to share my browser here. And as you can see, I'm coming in through a ts.net domain. So some cluster is actually advertising this. And currently, I don't know if it's US West 1, West 2, or East 1. But they're both, advertising this Grafana instance. And they also have established connectivity to other clusters via, in this case, Grafana data sources. So I'm kind of pointing Grafana to say, hey, you have a Prometheus instance at this point, and then you have another Prometheus instance at the West 2 cluster. So, and this all works and it's really cool. So, I can come in here grab here and kind of view both clusters at the same Grafana instance. And that's really cool. The other really cool thing that'll happen, since that both clusters are kind of advertising this Grafana instance, is that if your users are closer to, I guess, California, they'll actually go to the West 2 Grafana instance versus me. In this case, I'm in Chicago, so I reached the US East 1. And I think that's pretty cool. So that's what I'll show there. The really cool one is Open Web UI, which is just kind of like your self-hostable, ChatGPT. So I've exposed obviously like an external name service to do cluster egress. And I've defined in our admin settings here, like, hey, anytime we want to make a query to an inference model, we will do it over this external name service endpoint. So in this case, it's in the AI namespace, and then this is the name of the external name service. And this all works. So I can say, like, what is Tailscale? And from here, we're making the query directly from, in this case, US East 1 to US West 2, West 2 being the one with the GPUs. And that's incredibly cool. On top of that, I also have recording up here for you. So this is kind of what it looks like. User comes in, they kind of shell in, they do some stuff. In this case, where I have my buddy here, Karthik, he's come in through his MacBook, and he's shelled into this pod here, and as this container. And that's really cool. So that's another use case. We also have this ability, which we didn't really touch on, which is the idea of exposing some I guess, Kubernetes service outbound into the internet. So the way I'm showcasing this is using webhooks within GitHub. So this repo, I believe, we'll probably share within the chat. But essentially, what we're doing is, I use GitOps to kind of manage my clusters. And every time I make a commit, I kind of want to let my clusters know that there's a new change within my Git repository. So every time I make a commit, you'll see like the last delivery was successful. We're actually going out and we are pushing traffic. I guess I can't show it in this case, but we're actually pushing. I guess GitHub is pushing a webhook saying, "Hey, there's a new commit," and it's going directly to both clusters, which is really cool. I did write an app called TS Flow, which kind of lets you visualize this. So this is like another way of kind of, capturing our network logs. That's something else we didn't really touch on, but we have layer 3. We're a layer 3 solution, and we also capture, device to device connectivity, so we know source and destination of who's accessing what. And all I've done is just kind of visualize that, so you can see that like my MacBook is essentially, reaching the chat application, in this case, its own TS Flow application, as well as Grafana. And then obviously the 2 Kubernetes operators running in each cluster. And then the other thing we can see here is, when we made that query from the Open Web UI to our inference model, you can see that the US East 1 egress proxy pods made a request to US West 2, and then similarly, you can see the Prometheus instances also being something that we're connecting to here. I can share things like kubectl access and how we do like cluster impersonation as well. But I think overall, I think that's a pretty good demo. Alan, what do you think?
No, it's great. Question for you off the top here is, you said US East, you have stuff US East, your inference cluster is in US West. What kind of latencies are you seeing through that? Anything that Tailscale has helped improve on that versus going through a NAT gateway or anything along that line? Has it been pretty good on that response?
Yeah, so the way Tailscale kind of does its like NAT traversal across, I guess, regions or from one client to another, you're going to see like near the same performance of what AWS's connectivity is to their ISPs. So I think in this case, like I probably see like a 30 millisecond latency between the 2 regions, but that's mostly just the overall physics of the world. Like, where
Yeah.
it's asking you to traverse that packet to the other region. So we're going to get near, ISP line rate. The real bottleneck here is really just internet connectivity. So, yeah.
Oh, that's pretty awesome. And the recorder that you have
Mhm.
that showed the session recording, I think I mentioned this. These are stored within a user's Tailnet itself. Is this on a S3 storage you have, or a Kubernetes instance with a mounted volume that you have these session recordings stored at?
Yeah, that's a great question. You can actually store these in multiple places. In this case, I'm not storing it at all, but you could store it in a PVC as always. But another thing you can do, which we actually recently added, was the ability to attach like a service account to it, to the recorder pod. And then that will give the authentication into something like a AWS S3 bucket. And then you can configure the recorder to store its recordings there. And you can actually have like multiple recorders all over the world and kind of dumping into a central S3 bucket.
That's pretty cool. Now, is your Grafana, is that also self-hosted? I didn't notice that, or using Grafana Cloud?
Yeah, no, this is self-hosted as well.
Okay.
It's running within the cluster. I'm using Cube Prometheus stack, which is a pretty popular way of deploying like a monitoring stack, apart from like a Datadog or something like that. So it kind of like bootstraps everything for you, makes the connection between a Prometheus and a Grafana, and then kind of lets you grab like pod metrics. So as you can see, like we're seeing kind of all of the Kubernetes namespaces uh, utilization here. But yeah, we are self-hosting.
What's really cool is we've recently launched a partnership with Grafana. They have the ability now for those in the audience here that are like, oh yeah, I use Grafana. Is we use Grafana. You can do a PDC, private data connection, and add Grafana or have Grafana Cloud ingest your on-prem or your Tailscale related data within that. It's a really cool feature. It's in, I think, private preview with Grafana today, but you can reach out to your rep there, and I think we have a blog post about it from a couple weeks ago that talks about that as well.
Yeah. Another thing that we didn't really touch on is the operator has the ability to kind of also deploy the other deployment models that you touched on. So we can deploy subnet routers and we can deploy app connectors. So a popular use case I've seen is, dropping a subnet router somewhere in your cluster and then exposing the pod and service siders so that, your developers or anyone can come in and directly reach individual pods or cluster IP services.
That's pretty awesome, for sure. See a few questions coming in there on that line. We'll get to those as well. Just trying to think if there's anything else that, because I'm, seeing this, I'm like, oh, what if I do this? Oh, yeah, I know this is, heavily geared obviously today with AWS, but let's say I'm Mr. Customer, but I don't use AWS. I use another cloud provider out there. How complex would be implementing Tailscale and this kind of, I say demo, but this kind of model with multiple clusters? Is that fairly easy to do?
Yeah, I would say it overall is. Tailscale kind of like lives in this path of like, hey, it just works, right? So you could drop Tailscale proxies in any of your clusters and kind of have a hybrid approach. So you could drop a Kubernetes cluster in Nebius that's doing the GPU training, and then another one in AWS and establish connectivity. And that's like kind of a really great path there, is that you can be really hybrid in your approach of who has that, of which clusters you're connecting to, and kind of build your own like I guess network layer or compute layer.
That is cool. We definitely have a number of AI companies and customers that are probably leveraging multiple clouds with I don't know if they're doing with Kubernetes, maybe they are, but it is kind of just neat to see some of that architecture there. I did have a question. Someone from is asking, diving a little bit more into the Kubernetes RBAC that you highlighted. Is that I don't know if you want to share screen, kind of dig into that for a little bit if you're able to do that, Raj.
Yeah, yeah, I can share a little bit. Yeah, let's do it. Okay, luckily I still have the repo. So
And
uh,
I did put the link to the repo in chat, and Looks like Kate also put in the repo to the Grafana integration as well for those that are interested.
Of course. Yeah, so this is like what it would typically look like. So there's two configurations you kind of make within the cluster. So the first thing you're doing is you're kind of telling the Kubernetes operator that anytime a super user comes in, so in this case like an admin user, they're allowed to impersonate what we call like cluster role impersonation as a system type master. And then we're also doing things like enforcing reporting. Now, if you wanted to, give a certain subset of users only read-only access, or maybe you want to scope them down to a namespace, what you can do is kind of tell the operator to match the group, the cluster role group within your cluster. So in this case, any member who's not, I guess in this case, a super user will now come in as a reader. So they'll only be able to read what's on the cluster and also work on enforce reporting. So that's kind of what's going on there. And this is like what a role would look like. So in this case, I'm attaching the group tailnet readers, which was the same that we had in our ACL defined, and saying that they have the cluster role of view.
That's pretty cool. Go back to your JSON file there on the Tailscale there. So for those that were wondering about the recorder piece there, I'm going to highlight a little bit the recorder, enforce recorder. What does that mean? The recording is something that's optional within Tailscale. It doesn't come by default turned on. It is a feature that you can enable and pretty much on all the plans that we have today with Tailscale. And it gives you the ability to say, hey, anything that happens when I'm cube execing in or doing an SSH session, here's the recorder that it's going to record that session to. The enforce piece there is a really cool kind of security piece there is if that is set to true, and somehow that recorder fails and it went offline, and then Raj tries to SSH or kube exec in, it's actually going to prevent him from doing that because we have an enforcement feature that's saying, you know what, we're only going to allow connectivity as long as the recorder is up and running. So as you're playing or experimenting, saying, hey, I like this recording piece here, I want to have better audit capabilities. Those are two little features there that can be really helpful for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let me see here. We got a few other questions here. What level of subscription do you need to get all the functionality you demoed? You see, we here. Do you have custom groups in this one?
Custom groups like skim groups? No.
Yeah, or you do have a custom name group, like a named group super user group. Okay,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
yeah, that question from Pat asking, like, hey, what kind of plan? You can probably get this because the operator is not segmented to any specific Tailscale plan, so you can run that. There are some features here like Raj is using group, super user, group, whatever. And that is, I believe, on our premium plan because the starter SKU, the starter plan has what we call auto groups, which are like auto group member, auto group admin. So if you're comfortable with just a couple of the auto groups, you can just leverage that. But if you are engineering centric or you want more of those custom groups, that would be the premium plan. Now, personal plans, if you're like a free user or on that line, I think you have access to all these and can easily leverage them for sure.
Yeah, groups, I believe by default are on the starter plan. But the real difference is if you want to bring in things like your group sync from a skim provider like I don't know, Entra or Okta or something like that. So as far as like the only thing that you wouldn't be able to do, I guess, on the starter plan from a Kubernetes perspective is the recording aspect. Everything else can be done by you, obviously, between those 3 users limit and then the 100 machine count.
Another question, do you have any issues, using EKS if someone's, using EKS and, EKS is the nice thing about it, it provides you some quick ability to spin up an AWS cluster, scale it and do all kinds of cool stuff with it. By leveraging Tailscale from the connectivity glue, that networking layer, does it help eliminate some manual AWS configuration or EKS configurations that you might have had to do previously? Or does it kind of help simplify some of that?
Um, I think uh I think possibly it's really dependent on what you're trying to accomplish. Um, so like obviously like establishing connectivity between clusters, traditionally the way to do that would be, establishing like VPC connectivity and defining things maybe via Terraform and how you would actually establish that connectivity. So I guess in that aspect, it wouldn't make it much simpler because essentially what you're doing is just, giving authentication to one cluster to your tailnet and then giving authentication to another cluster on your tailnet. And then the connectivity kind of just gets established magically like that. Um, so hoping that answers your question, but
Yeah.
it's really dependent. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. I did see another question that didn't come in, came through our chat. Does Tailscale work well with Keycloak? So I know we didn't really touch on the identity provider side here, but Tailscale, kind of rewinding a little bit, we support a number of anything that's OIDC compliant kind of out of the box. Microsoft, Google, Workspace, Okta, Office 365, tools like Jump Cloud, Auth0, etc. Keycloak does work if we have customers that are using it today. We don't have a specific guide on our site around Keycloak, but if you do have a Keycloak instance configured and set up, you look in our documentation under custom OIDC providers and follow the instructions there, and that should enable you to get Keycloak working well. The only thing Tailscale does not work for those that are like, oh, I've got on-prem Active Directory here. It's not going to work with that because OIDC requires a web endpoint, secure web endpoint. Typically, on-prem OIDC, on-prem Active Directory does not. But a lot of times, our customers that are running those might have a federation with Entra or something to that effect, and they can leverage that identity along the line. No, these are great questions along the line. No, that was an awesome kind of demo showcasing, how you can leverage the operator in EKS, cross cluster US East, US West, and just, pulling that data across. Thank you for that. Looking at some of the questions, another one here from Charm. There's a computer count mentioned. Is this count per subscription level? So every Tailscale account, if you create a free one right now after here, you're like, sweet, let me just sign it with my Gmail and go. You'll have 100 devices. So every Tailscale, every Tailnet gets a baseline of 100 devices. But let's say you have 10 employees in your company and you're on one of our starter plans or something like that. You now have 100 devices plus 10 per user. So you would have a total of 200 devices. And then it goes up there, premiums 20, et cetera, et cetera. Now, if you are saying, well, there's only 10 of us, but we've got 7,000 IoT devices because we're big in that world, and we have customers that do that, reach out to someone on our account team, our sales team here at Tailscale. They can work with you with a custom device pricing model. We do have customers that have tens of thousands of devices running on Tailscale today and, not as many employees. So it does scale very well on that line. So hopefully that was answer that question there. No, great questions. Let me see what else we got here. Anything else you guys like to see? We do have a little bit of time left, so take this time for if you've got something that, hey, I want to see this in action or whatnot. Let me know. Let me get back to my slideshow here, and I'll just get this screen shared, and then oh, QA. There we go. We'll go to the QA piece here. If you have any other questions, we'll go. Any other
Right. Oh, go ahead.
I guess no, yeah, one last thing I just thought of
Ah.
sorry, Kate, Raj, any kind of gotchas to be on the lookout for if I am, I'm looking at this today and I'm like, oh, this looks awesome. I want to set up my own, LLM cluster and do some testing. are there any kind of security gotchas or things that I need to be aware of before I download your repo and start poking around and rolling it out on AWS with Tailscale?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'm using Flux CD, which is kind of like this open source GitOps tool. So I probably wouldn't recommend you kind of just you could I would use it as a reference point. But things like there that are in there are like my encrypted SOPs, passwords, to kind of download models from Hugging Face, provide a Tailscale OAuth key to actually authenticate my cluster into our Tailnet. But everything else is in there, so it's a great reference point for running all of our different kinds of deployment strategies. So whether that be app connectors, subnet routes, recorders. There's also bonuses in there like Tailscale sidecars, which is another thing that some of our customers utilize. Yeah, so a great reference point. Probably not one that you just kind of just fork and then try to replicate,
Yeah.
unless you really understand how Flux works in general.
Cool. Awesome.
Um,
Let me see here. We got another question. Kartik has been huge on answering those on chat, so thank you for doing that. And I think we're good unless anyone else has any other questions. I'll turn it back over to you, Kate, on your side of the fence.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you guys so much. Shout out to Alan and Raj for hosting an incredible session today. Thank you to Kartik for absolutely crushing the Q&A in the comments. Kartik, you are amazing. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And of course, thank you to all of you for hanging out with us this afternoon or evening or early morning, depending on where you are in the world. As a reminder, today's session has been recorded, so I will work on getting that recording out to all of you and any related resources as well. It will take me a couple days to get all of that together, but look for that early next week. On behalf of the entire Tailscale team, thanks again for joining us today. We hope you found it valuable, and we look forward to seeing you again at a future webinar. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
you guys have a good day.